public from?
I'm working on legislation to try to centralize that reporting. I want the American public to know. Yeah, I want the American public to know too that if you're scammed, you should report. It is nothing to be ashamed of.
Yes.
These are very smart scammers who are using very sophisticated techniques. Let me move on to another issue. According to recent reporting, the Social Security Inspector General is investigating an.
Welcome back to Freedom Forge. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications because we cover the political stories and Senate hearings the mainstream media either ignores or twists beyond recognition. Today, we're reacting to a heated Senate hearing focused on IRS security, Social Security data protection, taxpayer frustration, and growing concerns about scams, identity theft, and government accountability. Senators questioned officials about reports that sensitive Social Security numbers may have been improperly accessed, while also discussing the explosion of AI-powered scams targeting ordinary Americans. And honestly, this hearing exposed something millions of Americans already feel every single day. The federal government keeps collecting more of our data while struggling to protect the information it already has.
Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Wyden, for having this hearing, and Mr. Bisignano, it's good to see you. I want to start by talking about something I'm working on as ranking member of the Joint Economic Committee. Just recently, I sent a bipartisan alert to help the public better avoid common tax scams. Scammers are increasingly using AI to realistically impersonate the IRS online and over the phone in order to steal taxpayers' refunds, payments, and identities. When Americans are scammed, they can, of course, report the scam to the IRS. However, there are 7 other federal agencies who also accept scam reports, each in a different way, on a different website. As a result, Americans who are attacked by scammers often don't know where to turn, and they often don't report at all. How does the IRS work with other federal agencies to combat scams, and will you commit to working across federal agencies to simplify the reporting process for scam victims?
First, yes. And, we took a very active role in Slam the Scam Day. Yeah. And I think it's one of the most important things. I think IRS, honestly, is IRS and Social Security, we believe are the 2 most prevalent. Yeah. I'm happy to work across the whole place because this is, to me, one of the things we have to protect the American public from.
I'm working on legislation to try to centralize that reporting. I want the American public to know. Yeah, I want the American public to know too that if you're scammed, you should report. It is nothing to be ashamed of.
Yes.
These are very smart scammers who are using very sophisticated techniques. Let me move on to another issue. According to recent reporting, the Social Security Inspector General is investigating an unprecedented violation of Americans' private information involving a former DOJ staffer who purportedly took the Social Security numbers of potentially every American. If this data gets into the wrong hands or got in the wrong hands, it could unleash a massive wave of scams across the country. I want to follow up on what you told my colleagues about this issue earlier today. First of all, have you provided the chairman and ranking member of this committee a review about this incident?
Yes.
Okay,
That's not true.
Yeah, I think there is confusion. Yeah.
Excuse my colleague.
No, yeah, go ahead.
What the witness has answered is not true. He's now said to 2 United States senators on this committee something that's untruthful. We have not got that information. We'd like it. I don't want my colleagues' time to be taken because of my comments.
Our staff's met with your staff.
That would be helpful because I think your answer this morning was confusing, and I appreciate the clarification from the ranking member. The Social Security Inspector General sent this committee a letter 1 month ago saying that she is investigating this incident. Is it true that the Inspector General is investigating?
Yes.
Did a DOJ employee take millions of Social Security numbers from the Social Security Administration?
We have no belief that that occurred, and I think, we're going to feel very good when the Inspector General is done with their report.
Well, the Inspector General has been clear in her letter, and without objection, I'd like to introduce the letter from the Inspector General dated March 6, 2026. She says she is investigating an anonymous report, but here's my question for you, and she has been clear that she's not going to share information with this committee in detail because she doesn't want to compromise an ongoing investigation. So I am assuming she is also putting up some level of wall between the leadership
100%.
of Social Security and IRS and not discussing the details. So you don't know what the outcome of that investigation is going to be. Is that correct?
100%.
So let's operate on the fact that if you don't know what the outcome's going to be.
No, I was answering that 100%. She is not communicating during the investigation.
Right. So you don't have any reason to believe there is going to be a finding that the information was stolen or it wasn't stolen?
I don't believe that we're going to find that any data was stolen. It's an anonymous letter that people have researched inside and out, and now the Inspector General is researching it.
Well, let me ask you this question in your capacity here as the leader of the IRS. Let's say that the Inspector General, contrary to your current belief, does find that there was the theft of Social Security numbers. At the IRS, how are you preparing for the possibility that DOJ's actions could put millions of Americans at risk of identity theft? What are you all doing to prepare in case this anonymous report is true?
Well, because we brought in outside experts to also take a review of the environment in both organizations.
I'm sorry?
We brought
I just
in
didn't hear that.
I said we brought in outside experts to look to ensure that we weren't the only people ensuring that the environment was secure. And
So the IRS is doing nothing additional to prepare for the possibility that pretty much every American Social Security number has gotten into the wrong hands, and doing nothing to prepare for the fact that those Social Security numbers and that identity theft could be used to try to steal people's tax refunds.
There's been no identity theft identified, and it's an anonymous letter.
It's an anonymous letter that the Inspector General is taking quite seriously, and she should. And you should too. I have other questions. I'm over time. I'll submit them for the record, but I just want to go on the record really to follow up a little bit on one of the lines of questionings that Senator Warren was asking. My constituent service team in New Hampshire gets inquiry after inquiry from frustrated constituents who not only have to wait a long time to get through to the IRS, but when they get through, they are passed from one person to the next. Nobody can really help them. And it is not until the taxpayer advocate gets involved that we get true answers for our constituents. And the taxpayer advocate team has been degraded, and we have fewer and fewer of them. So I would really hope, I'll ask you a question for the record on this, that you all will consider strengthening the taxpayer advocate office to make sure that constituents can get real-time answers to their questions and get their refunds when they are due. Thank you.
Right from the beginning, Senator Hassan raised concerns about AI-powered scams impersonating the IRS and other government agencies. And let's be honest, this is not some distant future problem anymore. Americans are already getting fake phone calls, fake emails, fake text messages, and now even AI-generated voices pretending to be government officials. That should terrify every taxpayer in this country. Think about how dangerous this becomes when criminals can realistically imitate IRS agents or Social Security representatives. Elderly Americans are especially vulnerable, but honestly, anybody can get caught off guard if the scam looks legitimate enough. And this is where I actually agreed with part of the discussion during the hearing. Americans should absolutely report scams without shame. These criminals are sophisticated, organized, and increasingly empowered by artificial intelligence. This is no longer some random spam email from 20 years ago. These operations are becoming advanced enough to fool smart, careful people. But here's the bigger issue nobody in Washington seems willing to fully confront. Why are Americans expected to trust massive federal agencies with mountains of personal information when those same agencies constantly fail basic accountability tests? That's what this hearing really became about. The discussion shifted quickly toward reports involving a former DOJ staffer and allegations surrounding Social Security numbers potentially being accessed improperly. Now, to be clear, the hearing repeatedly noted that there is an ongoing Inspector General investigation and no final conclusion has been reached yet. That distinction matters. But what stood out to me was the uncertainty. Senators were openly pressing officials on whether millions of Social Security numbers could have been compromised, and the answers coming back were cautious, defensive, and frankly not very reassuring. One senator directly asked whether a DOJ employee took millions of Social Security numbers from the Social Security Administration. The response was basically, "We have no belief that occurred." Now, maybe that turns out to be true. Maybe the investigation finds no wrongdoing. But here's the problem. Americans have heard this kind of language before. Every time there's a major data concern, the public gets told not to worry. Then months later, we discover more details, more failures, more negligence, and more excuses. That's why trust in institutions keeps collapsing. Another revealing moment came when the senator asked what the IRS was doing to prepare in case the allegations actually turn out to be true. And honestly, I don't think the answer inspired confidence. Officials mentioned bringing in outside experts to examine security environments. But when pressed about whether the IRS was doing anything additional to prepare for the possibility of widespread identity theft, the answers became vague very quickly. And this is where conservatives and right-leaning Americans get frustrated. The federal government wants Americans to hand over enormous amounts of sensitive personal information. Social Security numbers, tax records, banking information, income history, employment history, medical records in some cases. Yet every year we see more cyber attacks, more breaches, and more evidence that bureaucracies struggle to secure the systems they control. At some point, Americans are justified in asking whether Washington is capable of protecting the information it demands from citizens. And let's talk about the bigger political context here, because this matters. For years, Americans have been told that expanding government databases, surveillance powers, and centralized systems would improve efficiency and security. But what happens when those systems become targets? What happens when AI tools make scams more convincing than ever? What happens when bad actors potentially gain access to massive amounts of personal information? The consequences become catastrophic. Identity theft can destroy people financially. It can ruin credit. It can delay tax refunds. It can take years for victims to fully recover. And the people hit hardest are often ordinary working Americans who already feel squeezed by inflation, rising costs, and economic instability. That's why this hearing matters beyond politics. This is not just Democrats versus Republicans. This is about whether the government can responsibly manage the massive power it already has. Another important part of the hearing focused on taxpayer frustration with the IRS itself. Senator Hassan described constituents waiting endlessly for help, getting transferred from one person to another, and only receiving real answers after taxpayer advocates stepped in. Now, let's be honest, every American watching probably recognized that immediately. How many times have ordinary people spent hours navigating government phone systems only to get nowhere? How many taxpayers feel like they're trapped inside a bureaucracy that never actually solves problems efficiently? That frustration is real. And this is another reason why conservatives continue pushing for smaller, more accountable government structures. Because massive bureaucracies tend to become less responsive over time, not more responsive. The bigger government gets, the harder it becomes for ordinary citizens to get clear answers or real accountability. Now, I do think there's bipartisan agreement on at least one issue here. Americans deserve stronger protection from scammers and cybercriminals. That should not be controversial. But where conservatives differ from the establishment is in recognizing that government itself can become part of the vulnerability problem when it centralizes too much information and too much authority in massive institutions that are difficult to monitor effectively. And here's something else this hearing quietly exposed. AI is about to completely change the threat landscape in America. We're entering a world where criminals can use artificial intelligence to clone voices, create fake identities, imitate government officials, and manipulate people at an entirely new level. That means the old assumptions about cybersecurity and fraud prevention are no longer enough. Washington is playing catch-up while technology moves at lightning speed. And if government agencies are already struggling with efficiency and transparency today, imagine what happens when AI-driven scams become even more sophisticated over the next 5 years. That should concern every American regardless of political affiliation. Now, as a right-leaning patriot, my position is simple. Government exists to serve the people, not the other way around. If Washington wants Americans to trust federal institutions with sensitive data, then those institutions must prove they can secure that information competently and transparently. Americans should never be dismissed for asking hard questions about privacy, security, and accountability. Those are legitimate concerns. And honestly, I think a lot of Americans are exhausted by the constant pattern we keep seeing in Washington. More spending, more bureaucracy, more promises, but somehow basic competence still feels out of reach. That's what made this hearing so important. It exposed the growing gap between the confidence projected by institutions and the confidence ordinary Americans actually feel toward those institutions. At the end of the day, Americans want secure systems. They want efficient services. They want protection from scammers and identity theft. And they want leaders who take data security seriously instead of treating every concern like a political inconvenience. This hearing showed that there's still a lot of unanswered questions. And until Americans get clear answers, skepticism is not only understandable, it's necessary. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Freedom Forge, and let me know in the comments. Do you trust the federal government to protect your personal data in the age of AI scams and cyber threats? I want to hear your thoughts.